Better late than never.
So was it coffee this time? What was the delay? What was the source of the delay tonight? Because obviously I was early, as always. Yeah, it was
right.
you two slackers. Definitely not me. I was here 30 minutes early.
That's right.
Right.
Because you're very reliable Ty, we call him. I lost my wits. I got lost coming up the stairs.
Lost your marbles.
Lost my marbles. Didn't know where, what, or when I was.
What about you, Matthew? What is your excuse?
I didn't know who I was. So
who are you? What is the sky?
Metaphysically or literally or
bit of both.
Figuratively.
Do you like metaphysics?
Nah, not really, man. No, I'm not that into them.
What about virtual reality?
I don't like that. It's actually bad, like, the games.
Yeah, that shit sucks.
It's like, 3D televisions. And everyone's like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But we don't, how many years is it since they first tried 3D televisions and 3D stuff, and no one has it?
It must have been like 2013 or something like that. 3D TVs dropped, like maybe even earlier than that. I don't know.
They're honestly just annoying.
Right.
They're just a nuisance. I still haven't seen Avatar though. I want to see Avatar, just to say I saw it, but I'll be seeing it in 2D.
You're 2D.
Yeah.
You're not gonna do 4DX where they spray water on you and all that stuff.
You're in the ocean.
Yeah.
James Cameron would probably invent figuring out how to access and observe the fourth dimension, but for Hollywood, like for a film, but it's like a scientific invention.
Right.
Blockbuster.
Right.
Well, that's actually a thing that they're selling up here at like the Cineplex. It's like 4DX. They like spray water and there's like moving seats and all this crazy shit. It's weird. They like change the climate and they change the climate in the theater and all this. Yeah. And it's like $27.
I feel like that just affects your concentration on like the actual dialogue and what's going on in the film, like if it's shot properly, then you just focus and you escape to the film,
Yeah, we did those like D-box seats once for like a Spider-Man movie or some shit, and I
they
felt
don't
like
just shake around.
Yeah, and I felt like I got my ass kicked afterwards.
Break your chopsticks. Yeah.
yeah, like that wasn't fun at all.
No, that sounds awful.
Yeah.
But for Spider-Man?
Yeah, for Spider-Man too. So he's like swinging around and you're like it sucks,
that sounds
dude.
Awful.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Was popcorn going everywhere?
Thankfully you can turn it off. So I turned that off pretty quick, but but then that's just but now you're just like sitting in a chair at that point. So it's like you just paid like $7 extra or something. And for nothing. Yeah. You quickly learn like that was a mistake. And,
that sounds awful.
Yeah. But there's no ability to U-turn, so.
Also, did I fix my lighting?
You did.
I'm better. I'm a little better.
I can see your face.
Yeah.
I can,
it was getting darker and darker. I thought it was a bit. You have been known to indulge in bits.
Yeah.
I thought this was just like a new phase for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you? What happened? Did you change the bulb or?
No, I just I tried out a new technique where I turned the lights up.
Oh, snap! Look at you! Not just a pretty face, huh?
Yeah. I got the brains to go with it.
There's actually some brains under those eyebrows.
Indeed.
So, Matty and I were talking last night. And Griff, you think this is the defense review, but this is actually an intervention for you because of your recent actions on Twitter and the recent interactions that you've been having on Twitter. Yeah,
you were not well.
Yeah, you were not well.
Fine.
You were not.
Listen.
We thought you'd say you were fine. We thought you'd say all this stuff.
I can stop tweeting about Dak Prescott whenever I want. I just don't feel like it yet.
You
Oh,
don't
and my
need to do
lighting's
it,
gotten bad
pal.
again.
There's no need to engage.
Yeah, it was
also
a little much.
And also,
but it
you
was fun.
traitor. You traitor. Why is Geno in tier 4? You traitor.
That's
So
still a top 10 quarterback. If his efficiency, maintained, regardless of the reason, you could put him in tier 3. Absolutely. Next year, baby. Next year.
He'll find the tweet and it will be used as motivation. And when he has a great year, he'll be like, "Now I am in like spin move tier 2."
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna get
God, I hope
QT'd.
so.
You're gonna get QT'd in like a couple weeks.
And then I'll be proselytized as like the biggest Geno hater on Twitter.
Yeah. Yep.
And
you and Matty just hate Geno.
We hate Geno. Messed up.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Should we do the podcast?
By the way, if you guys didn't realize, this is not the defense review. This is the defensive review. We're gonna get really defensive on today's show.
No, we're not.
Yeah. Yes.
No, we're
yes,
not.
we are. We're gonna get very defensive. Stop denying it, Matty.
Okay.
Face the truth.
Enough. Right.
No.
Okay.
Fine.
Like the video, everyone. We got 17 people.
Do it. All 17 of you better like the video. I better go to YouTube in the next 10 seconds and see 17 likes right now.
Ty, are you in the Google document?
Yes.
You show up as anonymous blobfish.
Anonymous blogfish. You show up as anonymous hedgehog.
Oh, that's not me though, because I have my Google account.
Then that's
no. My
Mr.
Google
Spin
account is logged in. I'm logged in.
Griff the lighting.
I only see anonymous hedgehog. Griff is the net. Griff is the night.
We have a mole.
Who shared the link? We've been breached. Okay.
All right.
It's Sean Desai.
Let's.
Oh no, I hope it isn't. Maybe that would be a good thing. Okay. Right.
All right.
Welcome to the Seattle Overload podcast, where it's time for us to review the Seahawks 2022 defense. And they did play a bit in 2023, but we're going to take a look back at what the Seahawks did well, what they found success with using data, maybe a bit of tape as well. And we're also going to find and identify the areas that they need to improve. Griff, did this confirm your priors?
Did what confirm my priors? That's a very open-ended
this
question.
Whole exercise.
All of it, Griffin.
When you did a slightly deeper dive rather than your superficial anecdotal observations from fast-forwarding through various
when you took a break from the QB discourse and dove into the numbers rather.
So like the exercise of preparing for this here podcast episode, did it confirm priors? It did, and it was kind of the stuff that, not to pat myself on the back too much, but like it was really the same stuff we've been saying all year. We just have a full season's worth of a sample of like very clear cut, correlations and phases that the season went through. All in all, it felt like they made so much improvement in so many areas, even on the defense. A lot of things, like unexpected things happened, some expected things happened, and then even some like unexpected things related to personnel decisions, unexpected things related to results, and then expected things related to results in both directions. But like, yeah, they made some interesting scheme choices this year, while still like it's really important to hammer home that they're still living in the same world that they were last year. And it's possible to kind of live out of the same world, so to speak, schematic world, and still live in different areas of your playbook within that world. And, apply your calls accordingly and stuff. So I don't know. Yeah. But ultimately, I think it kind of just reaffirmed what we already no, but it really put it in a more clear way. How about you guys, though?
Well, it is nice having some shiny numbers to sort of, and you can sort of look at statistics and interpret them in the way you'd like. But I think these numbers do explain a lot of what we were sort of thinking, and also help describe that in a better way. So that was useful. Also, there's some stuff that I didn't quite realize, but it's sort of helped me now identify as a problem. So excited to get to that. Ty, what are you hoping to discover from this?
I want to confirm some priors tonight,
Oh,
folks.
excellent.
So help me do that. Yeah, I didn't do any research, just an FYI. So I let that, I push those responsibilities onto you two
You're
losers while
You're
I sit down.
producing.
You're
I'm producing. I'm
Ty's
producing
too-
my socks off tonight.
Yeah, this is MF socks up. Ty's too
Yeah.
busy schmoozing with Mariners brass to.
That's
to,
exactly, yeah. Licking
do.
boots,
And
as I always do. Yeah,
and Ty Keeling.
yeah. Ty Keeling. Yeah,
Tequila.
yeah.
Yep.
Tequila. There we go.
Hmm.
So yeah, help me confirm my priors. Right, Seahawks defense bad.
Okay. Well, it was quite bad. So season-long statistics in EPA per play, they were 26th. In success rate, they were 9th, which is a kind of an outlier. We can talk about that. Passing wise, EPA wise, they were 19th. Run defense, they were 26th. Success rate, pass rate, they were 10th. And run wise, they were 12th in success rate. Griff, why is the success rate better than the EPA, where the EPA is the bottom third or even worse, and the success rate's like the top third?
I mean, like very, very broad view. Superficially, it kind of screams an explosive play problem, right? Like they're kind of down to down, snap to snap, like they kind of have life, and then all of a sudden just a horrendous either execution error or assignment error or a combination or like a collective error across different people, or like being schematically unsound for something, and like maybe no one individual does something wrong per se. It's just when everyone stalemates and you're schematically sound, you can have good defense, but when everyone stalemates and you're schematically unsound, that can be the difference maker. That could be 60-yard run or like a scheme breaker, pass concept downfield. So it really felt like a problem of explosive plays, really. That's an oversimplification, but ultimately that's kind of, I think, what we identify. Like that was the problem this year, in huge contrast to last year.
Right. And kind of linked to that point, Griff, is stuff like they were 8th worst in the time they spent in each drive they were on the field. They defended the 3rd most plays, but it was only the 14th most drives, and only 37.2% of drives ended in a score, which placed 14th as well. So there's that kind of discrepancy between they're on the field quite a lot of the time. Their third down percentage, for instance, is 42.3%, which is the 6th worst in the league. Which again, they're not getting off the field, and they're giving up the explosive. But so there's these numbers which kind of disagree with each other slightly. The 59.6% in red zone rate, which is the 9th worst. 23.6 points per game allowed, which is not the best metric, but still 8th worst in that. And 37.2% of their drives ended in a score, which is only 14th. So again,
yeah,
explosives were the issue. It'd be nice to have a full number of those, I imagine. But
yeah, and unfortunately, those aren't as available to us this year as they were last year.
Right, I don't understand that, but anyway.
Yeah, unfortunate stuff going down in the biz, the data biz. Anyhow.
Anyway, so Pete Carroll, Griff, he did a end of season press tour. He did a end of season press conference. He did end of season radio appearances. All these very exciting things. And in those appearances, he said what we'd kind of been saying, in that he was talking about how it kind of went in waves on defense. So he said how we caught back up, then we kind of dipped back down, and then we caught back up again, and there was no consistency there. and they weren't complete in getting issues solved, and they could fix some problems because they're good at doing that, but they couldn't quite be complete at the line of scrimmage. And so we split it down into 3 kind of sections, didn't we? And
Yeah.
I think the schematic sections are a real thing. And the data kind of shows that too, Griff.
Yeah, it does. I mean, so the first 5 weeks of the season is the first, distinct phase. For that whole stretch, they were second to last, 31st in total EPA per play, 23rd in success rate. Against the pass, EPA 32nd, success rate was 28th, 25th in EPA per rush against the run, and then 17th in rush success rate. So, all in all, it's they were just bad at everything. I think, what do we want to unpack first? Do we want to talk about like the pass defense during that phase?
What, in the first phase?
Well, like, how do we want to talk like phase at a time, like why we think
I think that's useful, because schematically in that first phase they were trying to do the kind of Vic Fangio based defense, right? Hurt was doing Fangio techniques in the base fronts. Hurt was doing trying to hold a too high shell most of the time, and there was the games where they just couldn't stop the run even when they were in fronts, which should have been able to, and it was largely attributed to technique, right? So I guess run defense is the first area to take that.
Yeah, I'd say so, because like you said, they started off playing more tight as opposed to bear, tight being like 4-I-0, 4-I techniques instead of 3-0-3 techniques, where the tackle or the defensive ends technically, but in practice they're a defensive tackle. They're not an end in the traditional sense. They're playing inside shoulder of the offensive tackle as opposed to the outside shoulder of the guard. But then perhaps more importantly, they're playing with like almost like a frog squat. So their feet aren't staggered. And that lends itself, Matty, as you've talked about, toward like mirror stepping, like a more 2-gap technique, even though you're not actually 2-gap responsible. You're playing with the 2-gap technique. So you're engaging the block a certain way. Whereas when they play bear, which is 3 techniques, as opposed to tight, which is 4-I, they play bear, they're a staggered stance, then they can power step, and their first step is upfield into the block, control the block, and then work to your, half man, and you can disengage the block. Now that said, they were still, for the most part, over that whole sample in tight, they were still okay. They just weren't as good as they were last year in bear. So like bear and tight are both, 3-4 fronts, odd space, whatever. They were average in tight compared to other teams in odd space, but it still wasn't, the returns were still not as good as they were last year. And then we'll talk about it in the next phase, but like week 6, they revert to bear, they go out of tight, they go back to bear, they play the techniques their guys are used to, and what the coaches have the most familiarity coaching, at least recently anyway. And like the numbers are staggeringly better. Like you go from average to like top 5 in it. But so their numbers in tight the first 5 weeks, odd space, 3-4, whatever, were average. But then their numbers when they played their 2-4-5 defense which is like an over front, but the nose tackle, instead of being in a 1 technique, is in a 2-I. So you call that the nose is in a G. So they call it over G. In that they were giving up like 5.5 yards per carry, one of the worst run defenses in the league, and they're just getting pummeled. And the numbers reflect that. So like the reason why is, well, if they're average and tight, but then they're below average and over G, then why is their overall numbers so dang low? And it's because they're spending a lot more time in the 2-4-5. Now they spent like 40% of their time those first 5 weeks, that first phase in tight on early downs, but that's still about 10% less than they did last year for the whole season. So really it's just a numbers game. They're choosing to play this over G front in nickel over bear nickel or tight nickel. They call it penny, or at least Vic Fangio does. And it's really just a matter of not optimizing themselves correctly.
Right, and Pete Carroll, as we sort of enter into the second phase and that technique adjustment where they played it as they had done in the past, away from the kind of Fangio stuff that, you know, Sean Desai would have probably had an influence on, and more into being more power stepping, a bit more playing one high, a bit more of just a commitment to stopping the run. Pete Carroll, he goes, one of the adjustments we made during the early part of the season when we were struggling a little bit really helped us, and we got our guys a little more active, and you saw us take about a 4 or 5 week turn right in there, you know, which is this period we're talking about. And so we have to recapture that so our guys can do it. And that was when he was talking about being dynamic up front at the end of the season. So that's a key point for him. So it's kind of weird that then you know, from that second phase, they kind of stuck back. Like, for instance, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game. I go there all the way to Germany. I ask Pete Carroll about the bare front, get a cool answer. It's pretty apparent that they've changed how they're playing it. You think, okay, Tampa Bay, it's probably a good game to run a lot of bare fronts. Then, and it's easy to fixate on certain decisions, but this seems like a real crucial point in the season for kind of highlighting their overall philosophy. Brian Monet at defensive tackles left inactive, and then they run mainly over G fronts, and it's interesting how that worked. But the reason Pete Carroll described for that, when I asked him about it afterwards, was he said it, the struggles with the 4-man front and fitting the run that they had. Just he said, yeah, it's just different from when we play our 5-man front. It calls for a bit of a different approach, and the different coverages and the additional force players come from different angles, different spots. We are more oriented to rushing the passer. We have to do a good job to fit them up. We're having really good success in the 5-man fronts in general, but when teams throw the ball a lot, we'd rather be in the pass rush mode when we can. So that's why it's pretty understandable of how that works and if it fits our personnel to do so.
And like that, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Well, that's kind of the whole issue. Basically, they chose the over G approach largely because they wanted to have a better 4-man pass rush, and they felt, and they planned also, I think, to run more 2 high pass coverages. And Pete Carroll afterwards in his end of season stuff, he admits that they got the balance wrong and they made too many concessions to playing pass, and that just the blend was off.
Yeah. And like Pete, like what you just quoted Pete saying, like he kind of revealed the whole theory. It's like we're trying to accentuate the pass rush to benefit the coverage. And if you can defend the run from too high and playing a pass rush oriented front, or at least a balanced front, then you've struck a gold, because you don't have a weakness. But if your run defense is so poor, then you've got a weakness. Likewise, like the reason why odd fronts exist, well, they exist for a variety of reasons, but it makes it easier to defend the run while being outgapped in the box when you have 2 deep safeties. But then naturally the disadvantage is, well, your pass rush isn't as good. So are you undoing the advantages you have in coverage by your pass rush, by virtue of your pass rush being so poor? So then the flip side of it is, well, can you generate a 4-man rush in an odd front or a 3-4 front? If you can do that, then great, and then you can defend the run, have a pass rush, and play all the coverages you want. So it's there's a balance there. But I feel like that Bucs game is such a microcosm of their entire season in this over G front that we keep talking about, because and this especially relates to the whole, like, well, do they have enough talent question. When they were the Bucs leading up to that game, they really only have 2 main runs. It's duo and inside zone, and they do the occasional change up. So they're thinking, all right, we can probably handle that in our over G front because we've been playing really good ball in general, and the Bucs have a simple run scheme. Sure enough, Byron Leftwich throws out a one-time game plan that he didn't do for the following season. He throws out a bunch of like shotgun power counter trap runs, under center power trap, gap runs, like, or encounter and power, and just all this stuff that he normally doesn't do, and they get shredded. But if you look at their numbers in that game against the stuff that the Bucks had been doing leading up to that game, duo inside zone, they were holding them to like, I think it totaled like 2.1 yards per carry in it. So even in this over G front that we're talking about, against run scheme that they are schematically sound for, what that scheme is intended for, they had the personnel to stand up and beat it, play their technique, play their rule, and beat it. It was all this stuff that breaks their scheme that they defended horribly in. And I feel like that speaks to the overall picture. What they're sound for, even in Bear, because they had some issues in Bear this year that we'll talk about if there's time. But even in over G, like, they defend what they're sound for. For the whole season, they defended in this over G front for the whole season, weeks 1 through 18. They defended zone at a league average rate. So that right there tells you that they actually, even in this front, and that gave me pause when I looked at that number, because I thought, well, because I was critical of what I thought were like coaching issues, like details within it as well. Like, can they not coach this to them as well? But against the stuff that the scheme is meant for, they actually did okay. Not as well as they did in the other one, but if they could do just average in that front and play all the coverages they want, they probably would be a complete defense this past year. But then against, gap scheme counter runs, they're giving up like 6.5 yards per carry. It's horrendous. So then the question is, they're using too much of this. They're using it against teams that are that will go into under center in 11, and and against teams they know that go into under center, and they're still in this front. They're not reverting to their nickel bear. So the biggest discrepancy here, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but from week 6 on, when they reverted to bear out of tight into bear, from week 6 on, their run defense and bear nickel is ranked like 9th. Their pass defense is ranked 10th. In over G from week 6 through 18, which is in their other nickel package, how they play 11 personnel is the thing here. So 11 personnel, bear nickel, 10th run defense, or 9th run defense, 10th pass defense, and over G against 11 personnel in nickel, they are like 26th run defense, but 5th pass defense. So actually really good pass defense, but the trade-off is not working for them in the aggregate. And then go ahead.
Well, just on a similar subject as well, like their reason for the over G being the pass rush is evidenced in the numbers, in that their overall pressure percentage out of the 2-4-5 is 19th best in the NFL. And there is a bit of a situational thing here, because they wouldn't play as much 3-3-5, but their overall 3-3-5 pressure percentage is 29th in the NFL. So
yeah.
And then if you go to rush 4, there's a similar thing of 2-4-5 being a better pressure percentage in NFL ranking, and also just actual overall percentage than the 3-3-5 nickel bear. So in that sense, they were justified in what they did. They also had higher sack percentages in over G nickel than nickel bear. It's just the concessions towards that, and then the run issues, right?
Yeah. And so ultimately, all right, so week 6 to 18, how much did they use against 11 personnel? How much did they use their bare nickel package compared to last year? Last year against 11 personnel, they used bare nickel 43% of the time. This year against 11 personnel, week 6 to 18, they used bare nickel 23% of the time. So they just completely they cut it in half. Really, it's no longer their identity. So the main question they're going to have this offseason really is how do they go about applying their nickel packages? Is it a matter of, do they beef up their over G kind of world with more fire zones and more schemed actions to shore up some of the run defense issues? Or is it a matter of just simply living and using nickel bear more and using less over G? I mean, that will be the big question. Or will it be a balance of the two? Will we see both of it?
Yeah, and Pete said on a question about two outside linebacker types, leading to too few run stoppers in the defensive line, and just two defensive linemen. So that 2-4 look, basically, he said, yeah, we'll commit a little bit differently than we did. We're going to be committed a little bit differently than we did this year to make sure we solidify that. But he didn't really expand on that. But that may suggest more of 3-3-5 Bear. And the other thing he said was he's diving in as deep as he can dive on this thing to make sure the defense is our defense. So that, reading in between the lines, is kind of they tried some of the Fangio techniques which weren't really fitting their players, but now they're kind of going to blend it a bit better than I think they did. He again mentioned concessions in that answer. And there was another thing he mentioned about we went to more coverage stuff this year. We've really expanded what we were doing coverage-wise, and it helped us and allowed us to have a good pass rush this year over the course of a season because we covered guys really well, and those guys kept bringing it. And the combination of that worked well. We just didn't tie it together with the running game like we need to do, and that's where the focus will go. Which is kind of the essence of it. It's sort of what we were saying in a different way. Now, that's the run defense dealt with. What they did do, Griff, rather than, and they were, as you've just illustrated, they were largely an over G 2-4-5 team against 11 personnel, one running back, one tight end, which is what the vast majority of the league runs. But what they did do, and we can kind of get into the reasons for that, is in the third stage, kind of, are we calling that week 6 to week 9?
I thought that was second stage.
The third stage being week 10 to week 18. Are we saying it's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, they kind of went to a very watered down version of, if the Seahawks started running bare front as their like base approach from 2020 and 2021 with Ken Norton Jr. Before that, in like 2012 to 2019, their base approach was under weak rotated cover 3 with a bit of over strong rotated cover 3. And what we saw from Seattle is, rather than relying on the bare fronts, which had proved so successful from week 6 to week 9 when they actually used them, and the kind of technique tweak from the tight Fangio approach, they went to the kind of a very watered down, pretty obvious that it was like an emergency measure because of the lack of wrinkles off it. Like there wasn't the usual tweaks that there had been in the past on these looks, but they went to under weak rotated cover 3 with a bit of over strong rotated cover 3 as their base approach to stop the run. Now, why was that? Do you think that was just because they hadn't planned to run bare in the way that they ended up doing it? They'd planned to run tight stuff and they had to scrap that. I just don't get why they didn't have more tools in their bare package rather than having to just go to shade, 3-tech, 5-tech.
I don't know. And like you can only infer and guess really, because in their over G stuff, like the run defense was so horrid in too high, especially paired with it, that the solution was, all right, we just need to roll the safety down. But the problem is that just the amount of stuff that they have is too extensive, or isn't extensive enough in one high nickel over. So like the amount of stuff that they could do was really limited because they felt like they had to do this in order to even be competitive against the run. Now they did have some games of mild improvement there. I feel like they backed themselves into a corner because they had spent so much time installing and repping nickel over that they didn't essentially have the time in their bare world to install like the full breadth of calls to use it more. So they just had to revert to like, all right, well, what's the most sound thing on paper we have for everything? It's gapped out one high defense. And the only way we can really live in that world is with our over G front. So now we just need to rep technique and just like, that's it. We're not going to be interesting at all schematically. But that was a reaction to the run defense being so poor in it, and the fact that they put all their eggs in that one or eggs in that one basket. So they couldn't revert to, I think, Bear the way that they would have last year, because like we didn't see any of these fire zone calls. There weren't a lot of calls off of it. They kind of just did the same 2 or 3 things. But I think wanting to split their time so evenly between, well, not even evenly, but wanting to split their time so much between Bear and Even left each respective front, the menu of calls they're in smaller. So they each one didn't have a lot of stuff to call with it, basically. So that meant when it meant reverting or trying to fix their issues, it just meant reverting to being super sound and uninteresting and just playing one high defense, really like load the box up, defend the run, and hopefully our guys can take care of, play action pass and all that stuff.
And after the Kansas City game, where Seattle actually had a rare game of fitting the run well from their forefront, I asked Pete Carroll about why the improvements in the forefront run defense had happened. Was it, changes in scheme, or if the players were more familiar with the defense? He said he'd like to talk to me about that off camera, which will come back to me, Pete. But he said it's not as simple as we went to more single high stuff, which obviously does help, right? Like that was a big factor. But he said it was about playing blocks, disengaging, fitting together, falling back like you need to, and the connection, which seemed really clear on that day. But that connection was lacking, which it raised issues with, like, we pointed towards, and we should probably mention coaches. We pointed towards the fact that Damian Lewis was in his 3rd year as an NFL coach, 3rd year as a coach in general, I think, former player. And yeah, he'd worked as an assistant under Clint Hurt, but now Clint Hurt goes and he's the defensive coordinator. You then lose him coaching the D-line every day in, day out, working with them day in, day out. You have Lewis doing it. I'm sure Lewis is very capable, but it's his 1st year as the whole interior defensive line coach. And I'm sure, there's a learning period there, and perhaps that is part of the reason they suffered. We should also talk about the fact that Sean Desai in Chicago, Griff, ran these 2-4-5 fronts all the time. Like, it was his thing. So you have to kind of ask, given that last year Seattle was largely a bare front team, Hurt was on the staff. Obviously, Ken Norton Jr. is a big fan of them, but Hurt was on board with that, and they had multiplicity in those calls. They had a bit of nickel as well, obviously, nickel 4 down, but it was mainly bare stuff. You have to wonder how much Desai had to say. The associate head coach is now seemingly interviewing for any vacant defensive coordinator position. But you have to wonder how much of a say he had in the 2-4-5 approach this year.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it falls at the feet of Clint Hurt being the DC and Pete Carroll being the head coach, right? But that doesn't mean, like, we can still isolate whose idea it was. And I mean, like, point blank, it was Sean Desai's idea. Now, Clint might have agreed with him 100%, like, oh yeah, that's great, let's do it. So, I'm all for holding, like, accountable is a strong word. I'm all for holding all of them accountable, but I do think we can use the Venn diagram or the common denominator approach to isolate, like, who brought this over. And I think it was Sean Desai, and it did not work for them last year. So
how did it work in Chicago?
Oh yeah, it did not work for Chicago in 2021. I mean, they're giving up like 5.5 yards per carry, eerily similar to Seattle. So I don't like, when we were watching them in preseason, we kind of observed the same thing, but we thought, well, it's just preseason. Then we also
I legit thought they were doing stuff like that they weren't trying to do. Like I thought they were like
it was a feint.
Well, no, I thought they were like Jimmy and ponying, like 2-gapping half the front, because otherwise what they were doing looked so bad that I didn't have an explanation for it. And it was such a regression from the same players who last year, whatever the front, they were really, really good technique-wise.
Right. And like this, like you said, the same players. And then even further, we were like, well, even if this is kind of like they switch things around more, we're like, they're going to have more calls coming, right? But it was literally they transfer their preseason game plan, like different formations, personnel packages, they matched them the same way.
Yeah. And it was like they'd have 2 high safeties, you'd have an open gap, right? They're out gapped in the box. and you'd be like, okay, well, it's the preseason, so they would probably game plan to stunt the front here to make this work, or they'd have the safety not be a backup, so he would actually trigger more aggressively when he sees the ball handed off, and you'd fit that better. But no, come the real season, they were still really bad, and there was situational calls which didn't really make sense. Where you show a light box and you get run on in like a 3rd and short situation, and to be honest, like that continued throughout the year, even though they watered it down, and it ended up with the most basic defense I've seen from Pete Carroll. But even though that happened, there was still stuff where you're like, the Rams are in 11 personnel under center, and it's a run down. Why are you playing this front? You're like asking.
And they use that one receiver like a tight end anyway, so it's effectively 12
It's 12,
aligned
the
like
splits,
12.
like everything.
It's horrific. All right, so here's just one big discrepancy. Now, it's not all front related, of course, but like it paints a picture. So weeks 6 through 9, they use Bear 53% of the time on early downs. They're ranked first against the run in EPA. Then weeks 10 through 18, they drop that all the way down to 20%. They're using Bear now 20% early downs, and their run defense totals 32nd. So they literally go from first to worst, and they literally invert the amount of, their Bear usage and over G usage. They invert that. They flop it. And then the run defense results also flops. Now, it's not all 100% attributable to that, but that's where you start. And it's just... like, the Panthers game, they're defending the run well on early downs in the first half. They're playing 5-man over, under, and Bear. And then the second half, they abandon that. And they're playing their over G front against 11 personnel, under center, or, they're getting gap scheme runs and they don't change in the drive and they're just getting gashed. And it's just 100% leaving the players out to dry. Now, they did lose Al Woods. That mattered absolutely because LJ Collier is playing 3 technique. In that front against under center, and he can't do that. So like that's a problem. But so it's just, I mean, they've got to find a way to be the team that they want to be schematically.
I found it really interesting when Pete Carroll was asked about Clint Hurt after he praised him for how well he managed it, and he mentioned all of the cooks, and we've sort of wondered if there was too many cooks in the defense kitchen with Sean Desai, Kyle Scott, John Glenn from the previous system. And obviously Pete has a say on defense as well. But after he mentioned all that, he said maybe we have shot a little too high. We might have done that. And, in what we were trying to do. And he took responsibility for that because he chose that he let them go that way, he said. And we needed to zero in, be better fundamentally up front to move forward.
And so, like, when you say be better fundamentally up front, is he talking about players or like how they set their scheme? Because
I think it goes hand in hand, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like
because
everyone would love. Pete said he said something along the lines of one time this season about how it's great when someone gets into the back, beats a block. Like every defense looks great when someone beats a block into the backfield and makes tackle for loss. And you can get that from the draft, but ultimately as coaches at the NFL level, you're not going to be able to get a player. You're not going to be able to coach a player up to do that all the time. No player. And Aaron Donald is Aaron Donald. He's one of one. Yeah, you can get disruptive guys, but that's not the coach's job anyway. And you can improve people, but really they got the blend and the focus completely wrong. And I think this off season they're gonna really change it. But Pete's comments they're very candid and kind of just admitting what we saw. But the word we got to get better fundamentally up front. He can't be referring to Bear because when they're in Bear, they're good. What is there to critique? I mean, maybe a game here and there. Sure, of course. Instead of being 10th, you'd like to be first. So yeah, you could get better. But when he emphasizes we want to get better fundamentally, does that suggest they want to continue to use over G the way they're using it, or not lessen its use too much and then get better fundamentally there?
I don't know. Or maybe it's just him saying like fundamentally is a catch-all term for like, yeah, we got to get our calls out the right time. We got to play better. You know, we got to get better players. Regardless, with the scheme, with it was applied the way it was applied this past year, it doesn't matter if you draft Jalen Carter. You're talking about going from 29th run defense on the year to what, 22nd, 23rd? It doesn't matter. You gotta. It's. I mean, like the talent ceiling is lacking a blue chipper or two, absolutely, but the talent floor is more than enough to be significantly better than their year-long results against the run. I mean, if anything, like that middle of the season stretch kind of proves it. Their season-long numbers, even in Bear, even when they had worse stretches, you know, it proves it. Like they're giving up 3.7 yards per carry. They're ranked 9th, you know, against other teams that play odd. And there's a lot of teams that play odd fronts, Bear or tight or legit 4-0-4, which no one really runs anyway. It's all Bear and tight these days. So like, I don't know. It's like Jalen Carter or Will Anderson or, you know, Siaka or Mozzie Smith, whoever your guys are in the draft at each round, they don't matter. They're not going to matter if they don't figure this out now. But the cause for hope, though, is that like Clint Hurt was on the staff where they had the answers for all these types of runs that hurt.
That's what's super weird.
So like, it makes it equally frustrating, but it's also the same reason for why we should be hopeful. It's like, well, all right, we'll just go back. What's worked in the past? Like all coaches do that. Pete Carroll knows it. Like that's why they made this shift in the middle of the season, because they reverted back to what they know works, you know?
And yeah, a positive finish on is the coverage improvements in terms of their efficiency, right?
Right. Absolutely.
And like, so the issue with Bear in an oversimplification was that last year they didn't quite have the pass rush. They coverage tended to get drained out when they eliminated the explosives and cleaned it up towards the back end of 2021. And what would happen is the ball would get checked down. They'd drop to a deep spot in their zones, and then the check down would pick up yards. And so what happened was teams would drive the ball on Seattle. However, when it came to the red zone where things are more congested, everything speeds up slightly. Seattle managed to get off the field a lot of the time, hence their points per drive. Griff, do you agree on that?
I totally agree. I mean, like, I agree with the general notion that points per drive is not the truest measure, especially like, you know, you look at Seattle, they had the best starting field position last year. But it's like you said, they gave up the 5th fewest explosive passes last year. They gave up the 2nd fewest targets to the intermediate yard bracket, 10 to 20 yards. The only, like, or if you want to look at it, all depths, they gave up they were 12th in EPA per target against receivers. And then from week 6 in tight ends, the week 6 on, they were like 7th. So like they defended the 2nd and 3rd levels very well. They were very sound. And the only thing they could get on them was stretching the defense out, hitting that check down or hitting the screen, like you said. And by virtue of lack of pass rush, the proximity to that target that we just said was greater. Therefore, those yards went for, or those receptions went for longer yards. When you're on a short field, like you said, you can't stretch the defense out, and that's why their numbers are good everywhere. They defend running backs in the red zone well last year as well. So to me, their red zone results was a pure, like, follows directly from their open field results. And that's why I think like their points per drive figure was legit. But this, like, so yeah, like last year, their Achilles heel was pass rush. They had a bottom 5 pass rush overall. If they were even average, they might have been a top 10 defense by all measures last year. Now that's conjecture, but I feel like you can make an argument for it. So this year, that's kind of a ghost.
That context is
right.
Right, and that context is super important, right? Like, that's probably why. Like, you sort of have to guess. Like, there's a lot of reasons why Clint Hurt would have been promoted. Like, it's a young team. They were somewhat in a transition year. Ken Norton Jr. may have had a reluctance to play young guys. There's other things there. But also, Ken probably saw no reason to deviate from bare fronts, whereas Clint Hurt was probably very open to a brave new world where they probably took, they did take it too far, and they went to this over G approach that was too many concessions to the past. They went to so many too high looks to start the season off and got run on pretty badly. They didn't quite have the situational calls to stop the run that they needed, and their execution and fundamentals up front in stopping the run were very poor as well. However, the not only was the pass rush improved from that, and it still wasn't great. Like their 31.9% pressure percentage was overall was 21st in the NFL, which is not like it's not what you want, and speaks maybe more to a lack of talent. But a big thing for me in the like pressure percentage, sack percentage numbers is the fact that their overall pressure percentage was 21st in the NFL. Their rush 4 pressure percentage was 16th in the NFL. But their overall sack percentage was 9th best in the NFL. And the overall rush 4 sack percentage was 5th in the NFL, which to me suggests that they're covering tightly down the field. And so the pass rush is then, even if they're not getting a pressure necessarily, they're able to clean up a bit more than they're able to clean up from coverage downfield. And the fact that Seattle this year, the big thing that they did was, rather than running cover 3 where they pattern match, they drop to a spot and they pattern match certain routes, and each week they go in with a game plan of this is what this team runs, and we're going to have the weak hook having issues, we're going to have the strong hook have issues being things which turn their spot drop into a matching down the field coverage. We're going to have the curl flat defender have issues he has to be aware of to then turn into a more match-like player. Rather than that, Seattle played in Fangio's style of matching cover 3, which is very similar to Nick Saban's Rip Liz match cover 3. Yeah. And that meant they covered the check down tighter. There also wasn't the issue of in bear, because you're rushing 4 and it's coming from one side, there are certain times where the flat gets drained out even quicker than it would in a 4-man front. So,
right. And like, also, let's not forget, like, as far as it coming from the Fangio tree, Carl Scott, being the passing game defense coordinator and the DB coach. I mean, he has, like, Zimmer runs some 3 match. He was with Zimmer last year. And then he also, of course, comes from the Nick Saban tree. So, like, he also, has familiarity, like, from the source as well. So, with regards to 3 match. So, yeah. And I think, like, it's kind of ironic, simply playing cover 3 kind of alleviated the way that they tweaked cover 3, alleviated, like, being able to defend all 3 levels of the field problem in the past, despite the pass rush improvements not being there that they thought they were getting this year. At least for, year 1 anyway, with the addition of Mafe not quite showing any returns yet, but some promise. And then Darrell Taylor kind of regressing, but then finding himself again. So, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of reason to hope. Do we want to kind of briefly go through, like, the story of the pass defense, though, over the course of the season?
Yeah,
we kind of talked about
we've accidentally kind of touched on it, because pass coverage influences, well, kind of dictates your front to a degree, and vice versa. The 2 go hand in hand. But yeah, go for it.
All right, so the first 5 weeks, I mean, they were horrible against the passes. They were horrible against everything, but they were 32nd EPA per pass, 28th in success rate. And then that was then weeks 6 through 9, they're 5th against the pass in EPA, 2nd in success rate. And then weeks 10 through 18, even though they regressed against the run, they're still 10th against the pass in EPA, and then 12th in success rate. So, like, that kind of the pass defense remaining steady, held on through the whole year, which is a really, really good sign with all the, the young guys. And then, like, if we want to unpack why it regressed from 5th to 10th, well, Ryan Neal going in and out of the lineup didn't help. And they just kind of had some injuries. And of course, you lose Jordan Brooks. That's not good. So some of those things add up, right? But, all in all, like, from weeks, if we bucket those last 2 phases together, weeks 6 through 18, I think they're 7th against the pass. So, I mean, they ended the year with a formidable pass defense. That's really encouraging. But those first 5 weeks, the way I see it is that they returned, or the guys, regardless if it was injury or a rostering decision, they returned only 1 of the 7 guys, or actually only 1 of the 7 guys that got substantial snaps in the secondary in 2021 actually saw the field those first 5 weeks. That was Quandre Diggs. So Jamal's injury, Neal's injured, Trey Brown isn't part of the picture yet, still isn't really. Sidney Jones gets hurt. Artie Burns was a possibility who played really well, but he gets hurt. Who played really well for the Bears, that is, but then he gets hurt. And then they make a decision and they trade Ugo Amadi. And then not only do they trade Ugo Amadi, but they move Kobe Bryant to nickel like 3 weeks into preseason. Tariq Woolen is considered, the most tantalizing athlete to come out in a long time, but also like the rawest athlete to come out in a long time at corner. So huge question marks. And Mike Jackson is a journeyman, undrafted free agent, like going into his third year or something. So just huge turnover. So I think we just kind of attribute those first 5 weeks to just being, a colossal mess of unintended players. And then the players that weren't unintended were super raw and inexperienced.
And like Josh Jones comes in, he did well at the back end of he did well on the back end of the last season, but he struggled, and obviously the Jamal Adams injury week 1 is a disaster because he's so good at fitting the run from too high, like coming down from a quarter and smacking stuff up, running the alley.
Yeah,
he'd have been big for their passing down game plan, but his impact's felt on all 3 downs. Like, people don't realize how good he was in 2021 from too high looks. They think he didn't really do much because you don't see him because he's off the screen. But if you actually go back, like, he's like perfect.
Yeah, and like in too high coverages as well, especially quarters. I think he has immaculate technique in quarters.
Yes.
I mean, here's a fun stat for you. On-off splits are tricky, right? But last year in quarters, when Jamal Adams is on the field, they were 6th in yards per cover snap. When he was off the field, they were 17th. And I don't think he gave up a single dig route all year long. Like even maybe like a couple of targets, and they were all ended in the pass deflection, either his or the corners. So there's that for you. We don't know if he'll be the same guy when he comes back. That said, unfortunately, and the contract's looking iffy at this point. Tragic all around. But so then week 6, they are insanely good. And okay, is some of it opponent related? Is some of it luck? I mean, they're playing formidable teams.
Some of it also stopping the run and getting into better passing down situations.
Absolutely. Complementary football. Regardless, however people want to view like how good they really were, the point is they were significantly better, and it was like intrinsic. It wasn't just conditional. It was like they were legit better. So I don't care however better you want to say, but we can all agree that I think that they did get better. And I don't like what do we attribute that to? Like the coverage usage didn't really change per se. They just committed to Bear. I think it was because they were used to it all. Like they're just more comfortable in general, right? Quandre Diggs got his footing. I mean, Quandre Diggs was kind of good the whole year. I think he just had some bad moments. I think it was Ryan Neal getting into the lineup was huge though, right?
Yeah. Neal, certain websites have Neal down as an all-pro this year, but
he's not an all-pro.
He got away with a lot of mistakes which weren't punished, as happens in football. But
yeah,
he is a solid player, solid backup, someone you tender. Might even be the starter depending on Adams' recovery heading into next season. But that did solidify stuff. Like I felt more positively about Jones than a lot of people because he was solid last year, but there was just too much going on, like the front stuff, which kind of broke him. And then just Neal coming in, along with the fact that the front played a bit more consistent for that week 6 stretch was big. And then, I felt most of the issues were just run defense and then rookie errors, like either like this is such a generalization, it's becoming anecdotal. We've used enough data though. But like, Kobe Bryant missing tackles last game, Tariq Woolen finally getting found out for looking in the backfield and playing more zone and just struggling, also being a bit banged up. But really, like Mike Jackson, unsung hero, because he rarely got roasted over the top. Testament to Kyle Scott's coaching ability. Another guy who's a tender.
I think so.
Yeah.
So, all right, a camp battle with him and hopefully a fully recovered Trey Brown should be really exciting.
Yeah.
Because if Mike locks it, if Trey returns to the Trey that we kind of knew during last year, during that 1 month he played really well, and Mike Jackson still wins the job, like that's because they'll have no problem uprooting Mike Jackson.
No.
I mean, they had no problem moving on from Sidney Jones, who played the best football of his life to end 2021. So,
there's good competition there. And also, I think heading into, if you told me that Trey Brown hadn't played left cornerback for the Seahawks and Sidney Jones had gone, you'd think that left cornerback was a major need in the draft. But the fact that like the coverage unit in terms of the cornerback positions on the outside is solidified, and Diggs is still Diggs. That's huge. And Neal gives you security against Jamal Adams, as shaky as that situation looks. So the coverage unit looks all right. Kobe Bryant, I'm still, the jury's out, but Pete Carroll was so bullish on.
Yeah, he's
on
serious about Kobe at
like
nickel.
like I know there's bigging up your guys, but he said to me when I was in Munich that he's going to be like one of the best nickels in the league. Like, so we'll have to see that play out. There was just some rough periods of tackling in general. I think tackling does deserve a mention because Pete said how they need to get back to playing rugby after the season sort of went off the rails, and there was that we spoke about on the podcast before, but there was an emphasis on punch tackling, which did result in some takeaways, but takeaways are largely random. Obviously, you can do things to accentuate them, but they come in fits and starts, and Seattle began the year doing really well in takeaways. Obviously, Woolen had 6 interceptions as well, but their pursuit angles in the open field and then wrap on tackles was really poor as the season progressed from a variety of players, not just Kobe Bryant. But Seattle did finish with 25 takeaways, which was tied for 8th best in the NFL, which last year I think they were bottom or maybe second bottom. So that would have been a goal that Pete Carroll came into the season wanting to improve, and they did that. I think also Uchenna Nwosu deserves a really strong praise. Like he played a lot of football. He finished with per Sports Info Solutions, which is where all the data we've used comes from. 14.7% pressure percentage in the league, 56 pressures, and a 2.5% sack percentage. That Nwosu figure, obviously the big splashy free agent signing outside linebacker was Hassan Reddick. Reddick had a 14.9% pressure percentage, so just 0.2% better. He had a 4% sack percentage, which is the difference. He also had 61 pressures, so slightly more, but like the sack percentage thing, it's not that Nwosu can't finish really, it's more that there wasn't necessarily the consistent interior rush that is needed. I need to go and study what the Eagles do, but they run quite a bit of 5 down looks, which again is that extra body to then flush it out wide. But I don't think it's Nwosu not being able to finish round a corner or have the bend to finish round the arc to bring a quarterback down. Like I don't think there was many missed sack opportunities from him. I think he was a really hard football player who was a mid-tier ad, and I think they hit on. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and he also had a career high in sacks too, 9.5. So that's good.
And then the big factor, don't want to finish on a negative, but the big factor was in the season as well was maybe it was the scheme change. Bruce Irvin mentioned when he listens and doesn't talk all the time, or something along those lines about Darryl Taylor. But Darryl Taylor was meant to be their blue chip rusher. Like he was meant to be the guy who plays opposite Nwosu, and then Maffei can come in. Remember, Bruce Irvin he wasn't on the roster to start the season. Darryl Taylor saw them sign. That's so disrespectful. I can't remember. I'm blanking on the guy's name, but they signed a guy from Carolina who got cut, and he was playing early down. Darryl Johnson, thank you, because they didn't trust Taylor to set the edge. Bam Johnson, and Taylor finished the year strong. He finished the year with a great sack total, 3.6% sack percentage. But the fact he can get on the field until late in the year, that really harmed the defense. That harms the overall pass rush figures. He was meant to be there like a blue chip player,
Yeah,
and
they
he
were
wasn't even.
expecting they were
And he wasn't
expecting a
even
big jump.
right, and he
didn't
wasn't even
happen.
mentioned by Pete Carroll in the end of season stuff. Carroll briefly praised Nwosu, but mentioned they do need to get more dynamic players up front as well. So
Yeah, like right now, headed into next year, Daryl Taylor, I think. I mean, you always hold that hope that he can be what you want him to be, but right now he's just like a solid depth pass rusher.
yeah, he
That's
needs
like
to work
great.
out. He needs to work out football for all 3 downs. Or yeah, but
Yeah, and like he was good against the run last year. I mean, he was fine against the run in 2021. Like he was solid. Like when it just came to like setting an edge against the tackle, coming to come get him, he was,
yeah,
he staked and was nothing crazy, but it was fine. But it was legit, like horrendous this year, especially earlier on. So yeah.
So the other player who was impactful in the pass rush was Quinton Jefferson. He finished the year with a 10.8% pressure percentage and 35 pressures and a 1.7% sack percentage, which, comparing that to some names, Dexter Lawrence had 14.5% pressure percentage, which led defensive tackles. Quinnen Williams, 12.5% pressure percentage, 47 pressures, but a 3.2% sack percentage. Chris Jones, 11.7% pressure percentage, 64 pressures, 2.8% sack percentage, and DeForest Buckner, 11.2% pressure percentage, 52 pressures, 1.7% sack percentage. So Jefferson kind of did what he does, which is he gets high pressure numbers, and that will see him probably keep around the league for a bit longer, right? Like
Yeah, I
the
mean, but he was ranked like top 10, and I mean, I don't think
right.
he's one of the 10 best interior pass rushers, but it just kind of proves the point. Like he gets pressure. Even though like it wasn't what they needed, and pressure charting can be wonky. I think Seattle actually had like the 4th highest interior pressure rate from interior techniques alignments in the entire league.
Al Woods had 7.7%, although it only 11 pressures.
That's
Right.
elite pass rusher, Al Woods to you.
Shelby
I think he
Harris,
was like 4th among
6.3%,
those
20
top.
pressures. Oh, there you go.
And also, I thought Shelby, he popped way more on tape to me than that in the figure. I don't
Poona
know
Ford,
why.
6.3%, 18 pressures.
And it was more of an ensemble thing. Like I was probably like when Shelby's getting pressure, when Shelby isn't getting pressure, Poona is, when Poona isn't, Jefferson, like that type of thing.
Yeah.
And like they still need a blue chip inside.
Well, what with Jefferson, like I wouldn't be surprised. That pressure percentage probably sees him stick, but they might move on because against the run, he was really bad.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, he was the defensive line. There's quite a few of them who sort of spoke up about how they wanted to play the different techniques, not all this mirror stepping passive stuff, more penetrating up front. Hence the change to bear that we spoke about in the run fits and the kind of old system. But even when they go to the over G look, like, and
He
they
can't handle it.
he just couldn't do it, which it does require mass, but like and it is
So
kind of, even as a 3 tech, you're playing heavy. But again, if the one thing which doesn't make sense to me still is like in the past when they ran nickel with an over front and they're playing cover 3 sky, which is basically what they did this year. They played a 1 tech nose tackle, but they always played a 2-eye nose tackle this year, and it meant that they were it meant the 3 tech had to play more heavy, and it means that you basically are 1.5 gapping on the interior, and it muddies the things up for the inside linebackers behind. Everyone plays less certain and more cloudy, and it's just a bit weird, and they just weren't very good at it either. But that said, a lot of the league does it. I think they view it as a way to stop wide zone, but I don't know.
yeah,
I mean, the numbers kind of are there. It's just the gap stuff was the issue.
Primarily, but then also it felt like duo could have
Not
been better
really.
though. Like
Yeah,
duo, like it was like a well defended duo run, and their over G front went for like 3 and 4 yards when it felt like it should have been going for 1 and 2. like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like the opportunity was there if they played more of a one technique, less of a 2-eye, and the linebackers just had their block to worry about and their gap, and they're not fitting off what the tackle's doing. They're just punching gaps and they're bringing the ball carrier down. Like, it's frustrating. Yeah, with Jefferson, it's like I think you can accommodate Jefferson just fine if the other guy on the second string isn't LJ Collier. If LJ Collier can be someone more formidable, like their usual, like Taba Rubin, Tony McDaniel, like that kind of guy. Granted, that's what Al Woods is. That's what Shelby Harris is. Even better, I'd argue, than those two.
That's what you thought Monet was before his injury.
Right. And Brian Monet. So it's kind of unfortunate how the dam broke the second one of these guys got hurt. But like Al Woods can moonlight as a 3 technique also, which is probably when Monet and Woods were both active for a game. We didn't see much of LJ.
The other thing as well is like their interior defensive line was not. Most of them are much better playing as a 0 technique nose tackle in the bare front. The nose tackle wise, like Monet is better at that. Woods is great at everything in terms of playing on the inside against the run.
Mm-hmm.
But like Poona Ford, his best football in Seattle's come when he's head up on a center. And Pete Carroll said the same thing. Like he likes him there where he can use his quickness. So it's like, I don't know how much. I'd love to know how on page was the front office with the fact that they weren't actually planning to run as much 3-4 looking fronts as they did last year, because the way they've rostered, they were planning for a lot of 3-4. The fact that the fact that they had to go out in and go and get some edge setting defensive ends because who could hold their own in like a 4 front, right? Not just a 3-4 look like a Bam Johnson. And I don't know. It doesn't seem that there was much cohesion with the whole thing.
The thing with Poona though is like with Monet's injury, and again we're gonna get into like roster construction. Like we'll have a whole podcast about like free agency and draft and stuff. But if Poona Ford essentially becomes your Brian Monet backup or your Brian Monet replacement, like boom, now you've got 2 nose tackles because you want to, because it's you don't want to put too much on them. But there's no way that if they return Al Woods, which I'm sure they will, there's no way they won't have both Al Woods and Poona Ford out there on the field together on the first string. Like, is it a matter of swapping them? Is Poona your first string nose and Al Woods is your first string 3 technique? Because Al Woods can play 3 technique just fine.
Sure.
Do they just swap those? Let Poona play a fast nose, and Woods be a big slow 3? Like Alan Branch of old, or even Red Bryant, playing a little 4-eye. I don't know.
Alan Branch, that is a pull. I'm proud of you, Griff.
Good player.
But I mean, like, but like that's kind of the point, right? That's how they've had good run defense, just by going like drafting day 3 or undrafted free agents, or going and signing Alan Branch, Taba Rubin, Tony McDaniel, Al Woods for $1 million every year. They can go find another $1 million guy. They can play around. They can probably cap cut Shelby Harris, try to bring him back for a few million.
By the way, real quick, fun fact, at least fun for me, Alan Branch and I are from the same town.
Really?
Wow.
Well, I'm not from there, but I lived there for like 10 years, Rio Rancho, New Mexico.
How about that?
Shout out to Alan Branch. Shout out to Rio Rancho.
Says he's from Albuquerque.
Well, if you look at Wikipedia, it says that he was born in Rio Rancho. And Rio Rancho is literally right outside of
You just went to high school in Albuquerque, Matty. You got to read up on your Alan Branch history.
There you go. There you go. Yeah.
Anyway, whatever.
English Wikipedia disagrees with American. I don't know what to tell you. Someone's just editing it away.
He went to Cibola High, which is basically in Rio Rancho. It's like on the border of Rio Rancho and Albuquerque. It's like right across from the Cottonwood Mall, which is like 5 minutes away from the Rio Rancho border. So get owned.
How many Super Bowls did he win?
2? Because he was on the Patriots, right?
Yeah.
To answer,
and he lost in Super Bowl against the Steelers with the Cardinals.
Oh,
To answer John Todd's question, Bryant famously played 5 technique, right? He played the big end in their old scheme, so he played 4-eye, 4, and 5, and he probably split his snaps evenly across all 3.
But that would be in base personnel when it's a neutral down, so they're not
Right.
expecting pass, they're not expecting run, and then also in run downs. So, the old scheme, it was he'd basically play to where the open B gap was.
Yeah, he'd be paired with the nose. Yeah, like
and
the nose and
and whatever the front, Jono my Todd, and whatever the front, they could reduce him down. So like if you're playing on the outside shoulder of a tackle as the 5 tech, right? Well, then if they keep running it up the B gap, then don't play in the C gap, reduce him down, buy time for people behind.
Right.
He was just a movable mass. So yeah, his best work came as like a 4 tech or 4-eye, really, I think. But you'd have to go back. It was beautiful. It was beautiful.
And we kind of saw some of it this year.
They did.
It was like a check, but it was just minimal.
Well, the end of the year, the 3-4 under look was with the weak rotated 3 was that. Yeah. But without all the tools and all the good stuff. So we had a question a bit earlier from 509 Adventures saying, if you were the D coordinator, what would you change and do? So I think it's worth mentioning that this was Clint Hurt's first year as a play caller. And I do think there was elements of naivety at times where it's very easy to nitpick play callers, and hindsight is also very useful. But like as we've said, as we've alluded to, there was certain things where you're like, why are they doing this and this down and distance? Like just play more honest. Don't you don't need to cheat towards a certain pass here. And obviously they have all these tendencies that they've studied, all these game plans. They know much more. They have more information than we have. But still, like it did feel naive at times. Griff, is that fair?
I mean, whether it was naive or not, they were underprepared. So
right,
yeah.
And as Pete phrased it, too many concessions made to the pass. So I think what we'd do is kind of a blend of 2021 and 22. But in 2021, they still had the stuff that they do in 2022. They just did less of it, and they didn't have the type of cover 3 that Seattle did. But really, it's about trying to get back to more of the 2021 concepts and options, while still keeping the good elements like the pass stuff that we spoke about. The thing with the pass stuff as well is I'm not sure, like, they didn't do great EPA wise anyway, but also I'm not sure how real it is because a lot of teams didn't need to pass that much on Seattle, so you kind of have that at play as well.
Right, that's a good point.
But we'll see. Yeah, it's got to be like a kind of a blend, and there's no reason that, as Griff said, there's no reason that Hurt doesn't know how to do that, and obviously Pete Carroll is very widely experienced. But yeah, Griff, are you on the same lines as me? Or
I agree. I mean, as far as like front usage goes, like I don't know, meet in the middle. Like with if 11 personnel is the biggest problem, and they cut it in half, can you cut it by a quarter? Can you cut it by a third instead of it being 40? Instead of dropping from 43% to or whatever 42% to 23% bear usage against 11 personnel, can you drop it down to 33%? Like just play with the numbers. Especially, or do you focus it super hard on 1st and 10, stuff the run, and then you can trot out your over G front against 2nd and 8 instead of 2nd and 4, right? Is it simple as that? But then also the one thing we absolutely have to see is you got to bring back your fire zone calls. You can't be static in either of the fronts, but like against 12 personnel, they had some, even in bear, they had some gap scheme issues, power counter issues, because they're just sitting in that front and the C gap is getting hammered.
And that was the major difference. Aside from like, they're running more 4 down, not 5 down looks. The main difference was watching games through and tape back. There was very rarely proactive solutions and ways of protecting issues that would then arise. Whereas the year prior, there was so much of that, especially as the season went on. The second half of the season, they had a lot of tools to help themselves out and move the weak point around, which is what calling defense is.
Yeah, all right. I don't think it can be overemphasized. Ken Norton Jr. did so. I mean, he had so much scheme. Like he was people called him vanilla. He was incredibly multiple, and like the way I would characterize his whole arc in Seattle, and I didn't always agree with it. Like we were critical at times in 18 and 19, but like 2020, like especially the first half of 2020. Actually, I thought he did a good job in 18, but like the first half of 2020, he wasn't optimizing the big picture, right? Like they aren't this past year, but like the tactics still worked, like it achieved the main thing. Anyway, but the way how I characterize Ken Norton Jr. is that he was a problem solver. He had schematic answers off of his base looks that were very pointed in attacking a schematic weak spot that revealed itself on tape or statistically. I mean, he was very like to the point about that.
Whereas this season, Seattle it was very jarring because Seattle kind of just had their things and they just didn't.
It was passive and vanilla. This year was passive and vanilla,
and it did come across almost arrogant at times.
Yeah,
in a way, in a different way to, what people would have.
But it's only fair to like still like, even though like we'll see what translates next year. But Clint Hurt being the DC, Pete being the head coach, Carl Scott and Sean Desai, they still deserve credit for getting the back seven like up to date fast and turning it around fast and still being able to endure, the season long picture there. Because I do not think they thought that was going to be their starting five in the secondary at all. And the numbers. All right, cover 3, rush 4, cover 3. They were literally first, not just from week 6 through 18, but the whole season in EPA per dropback in cover 3. Like that, if nothing else, that just insinuates that they have talent. They have raw talent, and they were on their P's and Q's for a lot of it. Not all of it, but for a lot of it. But that's a staggering number, and it didn't necessarily feel that way. But that number still is what it is.
Yeah. So. And Mike Jackson is only 26, turned 26 January 10th. So there is youth at the left corner spot as well as the right corner and nickel.
Yeah, and experience too. So even irrespective of age, it's his first year starting, right? First year really playing.
Yeah. So I guess that's the review. Ty, questions? What your questions?
Oh, my questions?
Yeah. What didn't we explain properly? What do you want to know?
I think you covered everything that I wanted to know. I wanted to get into the numbers of the 4-2-5 versus Bear, all that stuff. Yeah, I think I'm good. I think I think you guys got everything for sure.
Right. So
we have one thing that we need to. Oh, okay. There you go. All right.
Yes.
There we go.
Devo, we saw your kind donation, but we were like getting into the weeds of a different topic. And Ty and I have actually talked about this in the previous episode. But thank you so much for the donation. Devo asks, "Hey guys, what do you think of Mel Kiper's mock draft? Go Hawks!
Go Hawks!" Well, we talked about this on yesterday's episode, Matty.
That's what I just said.
Yeah. So
yeah,
and also you guys talked about this in yesterday's episode.
Right.
Yeah, we talked about this in yesterday's episode.
That's what I just said.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, but Griff, I was just saying also though.
Griff, have you seen basically our short summary was, if there's a quarterback they really like enough to take at 5, then they should probably take him. But realistically, blah 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 blah.
Realistically, I'm upset by that mock draft. Realistically,
Drew Lock is toolsy. If they want a toolsy developmental guy, it's probably Drew Lock if they can get him re-signed. But then if they like someone way more than that, then take them. And then Brian Young. Griff, have you watched him?
You say Bryant Young? My voice cracked.
No, Byron Young.
Oh, sorry. I'm reading it. It's late.
Do you mean late. Bryce Young?
No, we mean who Mel Kiper mocked the Seahawks at pick, whatever it is, 20, is it?
Oh, I didn't see that. I only saw 5.
Tennessee Edge.
Byron Young. He's 25 years old, and he's like a 4th round pick to me. even if he was 21, he's a 4th round pick to me.
And he's a super senior, so he's exactly what the Seahawks would
No,
take.
he's not. He's not just this. He's a super duper senior. The guy's 25 years old.
Yeah, and Griff, he had a few sacks last year, 7.5. That's Seahawky. They like sack totals.
I would love him in the 4th round.
Hmm.
Not at 20 overall. That's insane. That is insanity.
Devo, I liked how it felt. It felt like Kuiper had tried to do it slightly different, and it had elements of Seahawky thinking, even though it was kind of Seahawky thinking to the max. So
To a fault, yeah.
Yeah, and probably not, but
I only want quarterback at 5 if they're not going to pay Geno. Don't double up your top end resources at quarterback. If you want to hedge or you like a guy, wait till the 2nd round, and if they're not there, so be it.
I need to watch the quarterbacks, but
Griff, are you team receiver at 20?
I think so. And if one of the big 3 aren't there, then go Michael Mayer, whatever.
Yeah.
Because I mean, he's effectively a receiver in the sense that you're throwing the ball at him a lot.
14 personnel.
What about Kincaid? You like Kincaid?
I think yeah, I do. But he's small, right? And he's more of a true like flex, and depends on how well he can block. I feel like Michael Mayer would like force them into like Waldron getting into more like certain type of drop back concepts that I kind of want to see Geno just cook in. I think like we'll get into this with the offensive review, but I feel like there's a whole world we haven't seen yet from Geno, and I want to get into that world. But also Addison would kind of get you there as well. So with JSN, so whatever. Yeah. Say Flowers.
Yeah, and I think we're all of the mind, just going back to the quarterback thing, that the kind of unknown year that you could have from a rookie isn't really worth risking when Geno was so damn good for that stretch. And like, you can probably believe that was real. It's just about, I mean, we talked about this yesterday, Devo, but like pass pro regression, run game regression, receiver injuries, defense being a joke, like those things were what really harmed the offense, not Geno's level of process, at least, even though his production dipped. But those reasons are very relevant. So yeah, well, but if they take a guy at 5, then you know that that's a guy they feel can probably start immediately. So then it's
but at that point they would have signed Geno by then or not.
Right. Which is why like the Geno situation is very interesting, but just the fact that he's only have 1 year production and he is going to be 33 in October and all that.
It's an entire other podcast, but if Geno, like the first 13 weeks is, I tweeted this, but if the first 13 weeks is the quote unquote real Geno, then that efficiency eclipses the efficiency of like more than half the guys making over $40 million a year. And if you're getting him at $30 million a year, then they still have a cap advantage that other teams don't.
That's what I meant. I mentioned the cap advantage yesterday. Yeah.
Like you see, there's still cap efficiency here.
Yeah.
And then it's offset anyway by the surplus picks getting you rookie contracts at other key positions. It literally adds up to the same thing. It's incredible. The biggest thing here is that it's incredibly rare to have a quarterback paying a quarterback and still picking high in the draft, and they only have that from the rest trades. So they have a very unique situation, and normal cap analysis doesn't apply here, I don't think.
Yeah, that's good that you mentioned that, right? Because like the thing that I'm seeing a lot on social media is like, well, you can't pay a quarterback, right? Because like, you know, historically speaking, none of these teams are paying quarterbacks and they're winning blah, 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 blah. But it's also like you're not paying at other premium positions. So you have bookend tackles that are both on rookie contracts. You have, you know, pass rushers that right now are not making a ton of money. Like,
and you're going to have another 5th round pick coming up, and then another 20th pick, and then 2 more guys in the top 30 or 40.
Yeah.
So it's just a completely different circumstance for normal cap analysis.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's all to come next week.
And one last thing, the cap is going up by 20 million next year, so 30 million is going to be even cheaper than it would otherwise.
Kick that can down the road, baby.
Next week we will have Senior Bowl stuff because the Senior Bowl's on, and we'll hopefully be able to watch that virtually.
The draft finally starts now.
It's draft season. We will have an offensive review at some point. Maybe Dino will be paid. I don't. By that point, we'll see. We'll see how we work it all out.
That'd be cool.
It would be cool. That would be
cool. They should do that before free agency starts.
Yeah, probably a good idea. Yeah. But until then, follow the podcast at Seattle Overload. Get notifications on so you can see when we're going live or saying we're going to go live and then come in an hour later. Follow Griff at C-Mike Spin Move. Follow Ty at Dane Gonzalez. Check out his Locked On Mariners interview with Jerry D.
Old Jerry D.
Jerry D. Check out my Substack, Seahawks on Tape, where there will be draft stuff as well. Will Anderson, Jalen Carter article coming. Griff, what work are you plugging? Don't say Dak tweets.
Like erratic World War I or tweets responding to World War I documentaries.
Gotcha.
So the name of that quickly, the name of that documentary I couldn't remember was The First World War, and it's on Amazon Prime. I originally watched it on YouTube, but they took it down. So I'm rewatching it. It's really good. Don't start world wars, by the way.
Don't do that. Yeah. That's our advice for the show.
I'm gonna watch this film on Netflix called Narvik, which is a Norwegian film about one of the I think it's like technically the Nazis' first World War II defeats, where the Norwegian army for the Nazis. It's Norwegian language, so yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I like a bit of subtitles; they're more immersive. Is that weird?
So one last thing we need to talk about here, right? Matty's met Pete. I've met Jerry. Griff needs to meet someone now. Who do you want to meet, Griff? Allen Robinson?
Matty B. Matty Beignet.
How about Matty Brown and Ty Dane Gonzalez?
Oh. In-person overload? What?
Wow.
Yeah. Whoa.
Wow.
Is that even allowed? Is that legal? I will make it legal.
Yeah, he'll make it.
Yeah.
Oh no! Now
I got my new passport.
Two co-hosts.
You got your passport?
Yeah.
I need to re-up my passport.
Yeah, I did that.
Mine expires in June.
Oh, you should re-up it.
I should do that. Yeah.
You get re-upped.
Yeah. I should do. Yeah. I should do that.
There you go.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Until next time. Thank you, everyone. 5-star review, like, subscribe, download, comment. How many likes have you got, Ty?
Oh, we were at 23 last time that I saw.
That's
so
not bad.
You guys are actually doing pretty well. But there's 33 of you, so 10 of you
could be better.
10 of you have not liked the video, so you need to like the video, or else you're all frauds.
Yeah. Yeah. Until next time, enjoy the games this Sunday. Have fun.
Go Eagles. Go Birds.
Yeah, go Eagles.
Go Joe Burrow, who's better than Dak Prescott.